Hello and welcome everyone. Today we're diving into a critical challenge in the life science industry, a field that's always pushing the envelope with innovation. Yet there's a roadblock to innovation that many organizations just can't seem to get over, and that's setting up a robust and effective data strategy. We have this huge potential of big data and analytics that could completely transform drug development, make medicine more personalized, and revolutionize the patient care within organizations. But a big fraction of these life science groups are really struggling to make the most of their data. And this isn't just an academic concern, it's a widespread practical problems that we've seen in so many organizations we worked with. There's a report, a shocking one, published in 2020 by NewVantage Partners. They talked to top executive from top pharma companies and healthcare groups, and they found that 90% of these leaders admitted that they face serious hurdles in trying to become data driven, and 92% said that they're fighting against cultural issues within their organization that block the use of data and their business practices. So, why is this happening? You say it boils down to a few common issues, and we are gonna all talk about these issues with our guest today, Mr. Noel Gomez. He's the co-founder of the analytics startup Datacoves. He brings a wealth of experience and expertise in data management and strategy within the life science industry. So Noel worked with for over 15 years with helping large organizations like Pfizer, GSK, Johnson and Johnson, Amgen, to name a few. And he implemented and he helped them implementation and change management, working with both technical and business clients in their digital transformation initiatives. So Noel is well equipped to help us understand the challenges life science organizations face in implementing effective data strategies. So with that, Noel, welcome to the podcast and thank you for being with us today.
Thank you. Thanks for inviting me.
No problem. So I've been looking around and I came across a, um, a statement for within one consulting company. So I'm going to read it here. They say, today every company developing healthcare product and services is a data company and therefore a technology company. So to some extent, this is very true, but I am not sure that life science organizations they know already that they are shifting towards more of a tech company, or tech is taking a big part of their work and strategies for from business perspective. So with that, there's a lot of data flowing in these organizations, but the struggle, like all organizations, but in life science organization in particular, is the effective way of managing this data. So I wanted to start this episode today by asking you, what is like the common understanding of data strategy within life science organizations, and why they should really take data in a matter of priority, because now the data is becoming very challenging to manage and then extract knowledge out of it.
Yeah, so I think that the problem starts in life sciences companies because there may not even be a data strategy. Data is seen as a technology, it's left to IT. People are focusing on the deliverables, which makes sense. I'm focusing on patient service, I'm focusing on some clinical trial or something like that. But all of that requires data, right? At the end of the day, the issue is that how do I analyze that clinical trial? How do I make sure that the data is collected correctly right from the start? How do I know the effectiveness of my patient support program? So the issue is that data is not considered until it's too late. So
Mhm.
after, when you get to the point where you want to check how things are performing, then you realize that you don't have good data, that
Yeah.
you can't do the analysis, you can not answer those questions. So it is definitely a challenge, and it, I think it comes from a lack of prioritizing data enough within the organization.
Right. Yeah. So and then so usually organizations when they find themselves in situations like that, and this is where they start thinking about, we need a plan, we need a way to fix these issues, and then they find themselves between two things, like and sort of a picture of how ideal data management should be within an organization, and the reality of things where there's a lot of issues happening. So, and then find themselves in between two things, where they need really a way of navigating, the old way of doing things, the new way of doing things, but that comes at a cost. So what is really on ground? So you and me, we were really working into positions where we dealt with this so many times. So what is and the problems that are occurring within these transitions are not necessarily related to data only, but it's like from organizational perspective, there's a lot of moving parts. So what are the sort of patterns that you saw while working with different clients and partners in your career?
I think a lot of it starts out with um, there's some initiative. There's something that the organization wants to do. So today, the very common thing that you hear is everybody wants to take advantage of Gen AI,
Mhm.
so natural language, those kinds of things, and that's the buzz. That's what's getting the news. That's what the management wants to do.
Right.
But what we find is that if you if you just only focus on that end part of the process, you don't get as much value in the end, because you're starting out with flawed infrastructure, flawed processes.
Right.
You don't have a good foundation. If you don't have
Right.
a solid foundation, you end up spending a lot of time, wasting a lot of money trying to achieve something that, again, it'll definitely improve something. I'm not going
Yeah.
to say that it doesn't have any impact, but it's probably not as impactful as it could be were you to focus on the entire process.
Yeah.
The other thing that we find is that technology isn't the answer for everything. Technology is the first thing that people gravitate to because it's easy. It's
Mhm.
something tangible. I can go talk to many vendors. You'll find that every vendor will have a story. They will sell you on a dream. They will tell you that this is what you can expect, but they don't know your company. They don't know your internal processes. They don't
Right.
know, that the reason you don't have good data quality may be because of how you manage data, how you know who actually does the data quality, who
Yeah.
resolves issues. So even if you have the best process in place, how do you actually who is responsible for clearing that error or preventing it? That's another issue, because detecting something is it's hard, but it's manageable. But preventing the error is a harder thing to do,
Yeah.
and that takes more time and it takes more collaboration. It goes across multiple teams. The producers of the data are not necessarily the consumers of the analytics, and so
Mhm.
we need to make a better connection between those two extremes.
That's right. So yeah, so you talk about a very good point here, the foundation. So and building foundations within organizations in general. So I'm gonna focus here today on life science organizations because this is where the space we work with. So building the foundation is extremely difficult because when you get to a point to work with organizations that they don't have any prior of um, um, putting in a sort of a priority on their data initiatives or data transformation programs, this is not a priority for them. So then the problem becomes how to convince these people what's the value added of the data and how it can impact their business. So most of the time we find ourselves arguing about the benefit of this. So they want to do a data transformation program, but then they don't believe in these initiatives, but they want to do like other organizations. So sometimes we find ourselves selling these benefits to the organizations. So from that perspective, when it's like the big challenges coming from higher level within the organization, how do you see the implementation, the impact on that, on the implementation of effective strategies for the long term?
Yeah, I agree. It's very hard because the people with the money are typically not as technical. They don't want to necessarily know the details, and we have to change how we sell
Mm.
the concepts. I think so. That's really what we're after, and we need to look at it from their eyes. So,
Right.
what are they trying to achieve, and what will hinder that? So, if we
Mhm.
say we want to analyze, I don't know how many patients have enrolled in a clinical trial, but we're not collecting the data time in a timely
Right.
manner or something like that, or there's patients that are missing, or data transfer issues, and there's n number of things that can go wrong with that process. We need to not focus on the fact that there's a problem with a network or something like
Mhm.
that. We need to focus on the fact that you won't be able to do this.
Mhm.
Like right now, there's all of these failure points in your process, right? So
Right.
if we say it that way, we can say like there's opportunities for errors in your process today,
Mhm.
and what we need to do is minimize that. So
Mhm.
fewer data hops, fewer data manipulations, whatever it is, we need to talk in terms of like what are they trying to achieve,
Yeah.
and and back into the fact that we need better data strategy and a better analysis of the end-to-end process.
Mhm. That's right. Yeah. So in your case, Noel, so you worked with many organizations that were at different levels of implementing effective strategies, um, and if we want to sort of talk about a couple of the case studies that you worked on, and how effective the work that you did within these organization was in terms of transforming the way they do things.
um, I would say that it all starts with aligning the team.
Mhm.
So what we find is that people will start out thinking that they understand the problem, because we're all saying the same words. So maybe we're saying um, uh, self-service analytics. We're saying Gen AI. Everybody has some concept in their mind of what these things mean.
Yeah.
So if you pull out that slide, what happens in an organization is that everybody thinks that they understand what they're talking about. Like we're all saying the same words, but in reality, in our mind, we're all thinking different things. I'm thinking a square, you're thinking a circle, somebody else is thinking a triangle, and and that just happens because of our experiences, right? I may be more technical. I may have experience working with some of these technologies, and someone else may just have used ChatGPT, so they have a different understanding.
Yeah.
Um, and so what I have found to be the most successful is to get all the different stakeholders together and go through this whole process where we all really talk about what is the current state, because what are we solving for? Like, why do we even need Gen AI? Just as an example,
Right.
what is the problem that we're trying to solve? Because once we understand what is the current state, what are the pain points with the current state, then we will realize that to solve that, it isn't just going to be Gen AI. So I
Yeah.
was recently doing these workshops with a company, and the issue was actually in data entry. So the
Mm.
way that data is captured is the problem. So it doesn't matter what you do at the end of the pipeline. If data entry is difficult, it's not done on time, it's inaccurate, it's inconsistent, on and on and on, right? All of those problems are going to affect the result you're trying to achieve at the end. So what we talk about is really getting everybody in a room, even if it's virtual, getting all these ideas out there, and getting everybody to align on what good looks like, getting everybody to understand how we're going to prioritize this thing. We can't boil the ocean. Everybody will think initially that their ideas or their needs are the most important, but it's really a combination of these. We need to
Yeah.
make compromises, and so the goal of when we do these things is to essentially leave the room, the virtual room, with a combined idea. So that
Mm.
now when we talk about Gen AI, we all understand what we mean, because at the beginning we didn't. And I believe that this is the kickoff of the change management process.
Yeah.
And with any initiative, it's not just the technology, but how are we going to change the processes and the way we work.
That's
Um,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's really interesting. So I agree with that. So the only issue, like, it's not an issue, but it is something that is really important to highlight in these exercise when we try to establish this alignment actually within an organization, is that th- we need to highlight the importance of going slowly, in the sense that starting
Yes.
small within small projects, and try to you know um, get some quick wins in order to influence the rest of the organization towards, this is what we're doing, we are investing a lot of time and
Mhm.
money in this, but we have these quick wins, and then we're gonna um, increase the importance or the size or the impact of the project that we are working on slowly. So, but some other organizations, even though the alignment is there, they jump straight away towards big initiatives that are really hard to implement. So how can we sort of um, put that alignment in place within between different layers within the organization, so that they see the impact and the value of it, but then at the same time encourage them to go slowly, and start with small projects, and to drive that change.
Yeah, it's definitely a balance, and it's very hard. The larger the organization, the more resources they will have. Uh, the the thing that you'll see happening is actually you will have multiple teams working towards one
Mm,
idea, one initiative, but even between the teams, they're not aligned.
mm,
So let's say you have a team doing a transformation on governance, and they're putting in data catalogs or some kind of tool like that. Then you have a different team that's working on migrating to new
mm.
technology for ingesting and integrating data, and making that available, and how they build those pipelines. Those two are typically seen as independent, right? One of them is moving data and the other
Yeah,
one is cataloging. But if you do this well, those two are connected,
yeah,
because if you think about like the fact that I ingested the data, I should already have some idea of how it's going to be governed. So who is the owner? Where is it coming from? What is the SLA on that data set, etc. Now, what typically happens is that they're different teams. So the
mm,
governance people tend to be more on the business side, and the pipeline people are in IT. And there's the invisible wall between those two,
right,
and they don't necessarily work together. And again, it may be different vendors who are doing these kind of implementation.
mm,
But what in my mind, what is very important is for people to understand that things are not living in isolation, right?
right,
So the people, like I said earlier, with patient support services or something like that, the people who write those contracts, who worked with those providers, in the contracts themselves, there'll be information about what data should be provided, and what frequency, and what format, and all of that kind of stuff.
yeah,
Now, the people typically writing that stuff, they're doing whatever, they don't necessarily understand how it's
right,
going to be used later, right? So the technology people may or may not be involved, and if they're not involved, then they'll have to deal with the consequences later. So now it's too late. Now we've had the patient program out there, and now we
mm,
want to analyze it. The IT people say, well, I don't have the information in the format that I need.
yeah. Yeah, this is extremely hard to do, you know, and then
Yeah, it needs to be top down, by the way,
it
because
needs to
I
be
think that
top
the
down. Yeah,
part of the problem is that you have different teams working again towards somewhat of a common goal, because
yeah,
that comes from the top.
yeah,
But the leadership to connect the dots is missing. Um, Even the fact that you mentioned how people kind of go towards like technology, or some solution.
mm,
No one ever thinks about having a change management work stream that is connecting the dots, that is thinking about how this new um, initiative is going to change how everybody works. So the ways
yeah,
of working, it should. If it doesn't change, then I've seen it many times where you're implementing new technology and you get very similar results to what you had before, because it wasn't the technology alone that led you to that. A
right,
common thing that happens in pharma, or life sciences in general, is that it's a very risk averse uh, industry, right?
mm,
And so what happens is that people will say, I want to do X, but they'll put limitations, they'll put constraints, because the data privacy people or the compliance people will not like it, so
Yeah.
they'll the solutions people will already constrain their way of thinking,
Mm.
without really understanding why. Like, what is the rationale behind whatever guidance was provided before.
Yeah.
And I tell people, you should challenge everything. Everything should be on the table. It isn't just about changing you and your process and your technology, but transforming how the organization works with data. And maybe those rules are valid. Maybe some of them are not valid. So, should you treat different types of data the same way? So, if I have PII data, that I need to treat that very differently than if I have non-PII data. Um, but the processes are made very generic, so we treat everything the same. And so, regardless, we have to follow the same conventions. Or are there ways to mitigate the risks? So yes, traditionally we've done it that way, a certain way, but that's because those rules were put in place in
Correct.
technology of the past, and that technology has some certain constraints. Today, maybe you could do it better, have a better way of securing the data, and then remove that constraint. So again, it's in my mind, the only way to change is everything is on the table, and you push the boundaries as much as you can.
Yeah.
And I guess in the end, the organization does have to take some additional level of risk. You can't
Yeah.
mitigate everything, but if you just say, I want to be the most conservative, very risk averse, you're
Mhm.
not really going to improve that much, because again, you're limiting the solution space.
Yes. Yeah, and I've seen it happening in so many organizations, and in both cases, where you have initiatives, you have that sort of top down sort of level style of leadership where there's a common vision, common goals, and this is where we're going, all of us together, we just kind of work together towards this goal, versus some level of leadership where there's a lot of delegations, and that level of delegation on the management level creates so many blockage, so many roadblocks on how to do things and how to operate, and it sort of derail the entire effort towards
Yeah,
confrontational personal efforts toward
exactly.
versus working on the most important things that matter. So I agree with you that I saw these happening in so many levels on the
And,
organization
and,
side.
it, and it happens because of that slide that we had earlier, where again, we were all saying the same words in the beginning. So we
Yeah.
thought we were aligned, but we didn't have even a framework to make decisions. So
Yes.
one of the exercise that we do in when we do these workshops is what's called trade-off sliders, right?
Hmm.
So essentially, what am I trading off? Am I trading off cost versus security versus quality of the deliverable versus user experience, feature completeness, or time to market? So you have all these different aspects, and
Yeah.
the idea is that when you get everybody together, you'll see that different people put more importance to different things. So
Yeah.
somebody may say, "Oh, security is the most important thing," and
True.
somebody else is saying, "No, user experience is the most important thing." Well, what you want to make sure is that everybody understands that there's give and take. That
Hmm.
yes, to you, security is the most important thing, but if we put too many controls, we put too many barriers, what will happen inevitably is one of two things: the team will move very slow, the
Yeah.
solution is not going to be as impactful,
Yeah.
or what happens a lot is the business just what I call divorces IT.
Yeah.
So they will say, okay, you're making it too hard. It's taking too long, whatever. I'll just find my own solution. And I
Mm,
think that
mm,
that's
mm.
really what's driven a lot of these solutions, these SaaS applications that we see today.
Yeah.
It's essentially business people cutting IT out of the loop. They're saying, I'm going to do things. Is that the best thing for the organization? I would say no.
Mm.
It's not necessarily good in the long term, because that creates some other problems, lack of governance in those tools, and on and
Right.
on. But it's the way that the business is seeing that, how can I deliver faster, right? That's what they're
Yeah.
trying to do. They have some need. They need to reduce costs. They need to
Correct.
increase productivity, whatever it is, and they're just going to find a way to go around the existing processes. That's where we get shadow IT. All of these kinds of
Yeah.
things come from some other root cause.
Yeah.
And I tell people, analyze why. Why did they do that? Or how do we prevent that? And what are successful companies doing to prevent that, to change that process? So, an example of this is we talk about. I remember I was working with a customer, and uh, they were hiring people. This is more on the business side, and they were
Mhm.
more like analytics enablers and that kind of stuff. And they wanted to hire. They had a new role, and I said, "Oh, we should make sure that new role knows some SQL, some SQL, so that they can run some queries." And they're like, "Yeah, that makes sense. If they're going to be an interface between data scientists and all of this stuff." Well, when IT saw that, they said, "Well, no, no, no. This is programming. This should be in our
Mm,
shop."
mm,
And I said, "But why? Why does that matter, right? It's not taking your job away. It's just making sure we have people with
yeah,
today's skills." And
yeah,
what we see is that there more and more technical people are flowing into the business side, right? So people who know Python, people who are educated and
right.
have gone through these kinds of things. And so we shouldn't fear that. We should say, how do we embrace it? How do we empower? And how do we make it so that we collaborate better? And
Yeah,
that in the end, that's what we were able to transform. So now it's an end-to-end process. It's exactly the same governance between IT and business people, but that took a lot of convincing and understanding, and pushing back to those norms. And I'm
yeah,
not saying that everybody in the business needs to know SQL, but
yeah,
it shouldn't be a barrier. Essentially,
yeah.
if
But
you
I
have the
mean, my
skills, you should be
yeah.
empowered.
I agree. I mean, now in life science organization, I mean, you have people that are extremely smart, but the nature of their jobs is naturally shifting towards being more and more technical. So you have a lot of scientists,
That's right.
writing Python, writing SQL. They do
Hard.
their data analysis themselves, and most of the time they find themselves limited with a lot of restrictions like that.
Yeah.
I need a
And it creates
server.
worse for outcomes. I
Yeah,
would say, sorry to interrupt. I think for the organization, it creates worse outcomes because what
yeah,
will happen is if I don't give uh, that technical person sitting in the business access to do things right,
yeah,
they will do things. They'll still get it done, but they'll
yes,
do things wrong.
yeah,
And what I mean by that is that I've seen cases where people will download a lot of data into their laptop
true,
because there was no database that they could just connect to and query the data there. So what
right.
was better for the organization? It would have been better if I gave them
Mm,
access to the database.
yeah.
I could then audit what people are querying. I could, restrict certain things, etc. But because we didn't do that, they find a way. I
Yeah,
mean, I've literally seen people just put tons of information like in a SharePoint.
yes,
They'll extract a bunch of data out of different systems, put it in
yeah,
SharePoint. Now, what happened there? There's probably one person who had access to be able to download those files.
yeah,
Now everybody in the team can use it, but just as easily as they can use it, they could move the data somewhere. It could leak. So we created a problem because we were so strict in saying only these people have access to the database. Then they're
yeah,
only IT people.
yeah.
Well, business can be IT people to some extent. They have the skills, so they'll find a way. They will find a way,
You find a
and
way,
it'll
exactly.
end up being worse for the organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree. I mean, I do remember a case in one of the people I worked with. They so there are a lot of smart people working within these organizations, and they need to do really advanced things. Running pipelines on a HPC environment, and running Docker stuff, and they very very sophisticated pipelining in terms of data, building solutions, building UI interfaces, and things like that. And then they find themselves trying to convince the IT level to give them a room where they have to run their projects. But then there's the miscommunication in terms of HPC environment needs to be regulated like this, and to some extent I agree with that. So, but that limits the bandwidth of a researcher trying to do innovation. And I mean, the ideal solution I see within these environment is to have to create a sandbox where people can allow themselves to make mistakes and break things, and that's how they're going to learn, right? But if we restrict this environment too much, we don't leave room for anyone to learn anything.
Yeah. I will say, like, I have been in situations myself where it was the scientists who were doing processes better than IT.
Yeah,
It was people who, because these were, like you said, they're smart people. They came from other industries, or just some other experiences. And I remember clearly that I was in an organization, and this scientist, this is way back in 2012 or 2011, something like that. And
Mhm.
this guy was doing code promotion automated in an automated way. That he would spin up environments to do
Mm.
some testing, and so he was using all of these different technologies that he was doing DevOps,
Yeah.
at the
Yeah.
time where this was revolutionary in the life sciences industry. But he wasn't using traditional technologies. And even myself, I was doing these kinds of things. So I
Yeah.
was using open source tooling when no one else in the organization was using it. And the feedback I would get from IT is, no, 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 we only
Correct.
do things in SQL Server, in
Yes.
Oracle, and .NET and Java or something like that. So they were limiting essentially the innovation, like you're saying.
Innovation. Exactly.
um, and and instead of taking apart, and I always tell people, like, again, understand what they're doing,
Hmm.
not how they're doing it. Like, what are they trying to achieve? And if
Hmm.
if we can then say, oh, okay, they want to move fast, they want to do automation, they want to explore other things, and can we still achieve the security and all of that? And I would say that yes, you typically can,
Yes.
but the focus is more on control, right?
Hmm.
It's this idea that I must constrain everything in order to protect everything,
Yeah.
and you're not really constraining anything. All you're doing is creating more of these shadow ITs. You're
Correct.
having people, either they're doing themselves, they're hiring consultants, they will use SaaS applications. There's n number of things. And then in the end, it ends up being something that IT inherits, right? So
Correct. Yeah.
I go and I start a small project, I hire some small team, or build something outside of the organization, because I have the budget, I'm in the business side.
Yes.
And in the end, it's like, now, okay, well, it's done, it's working, it's being rolled out, people are depending on this. Hey,
Mm.
IT, now you need to maintain this. So do you want to be at the end of this process, or do you want to be part of the solutioning in the beginning? and
Yes.
and I think if we change the mindset, it's more beneficial for all the parties.
Yeah, yeah, and I mean, we're talking like really, we are not focusing on IT, just to make sure clear, because
Yeah, yeah,
this is a
yeah, yeah.
proxy. Yeah, this is a
It's
proxy.
not IT bashing. Yes.
Yeah, yeah,
Yes,
I've seen it. I've
yes,
seen it
yes,
actually happening. These kind of action reaction, I would say, right? So even
yeah,
on trying to implement a data literacy program within an organizations, you have to face comms department because they don't want all these emailing happening within an organization trying to educate people about the right thing to do, and then they advertise gains, or they argue against the email fatigue or things like that. So I mean,
yeah.
you have resistance on so many levels of the organization because the data transformation efforts is actually touching a lot of other area within the
It touches
organization.
many teams. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah,
and
like
then
I
you have
mentioned, it could be the compliance team, the data privacy team. Even I face this also with business people, where let's just do a simple example. Like, they want better data documentation, right? So they're telling IT, hey, I need better data documentation because people cannot find the data or something, but they don't want to be involved in solutioning it. So
mm,
they're essentially want to throw the problem over the wall, and that's not a problem for IT to solve alone, right? It's a combination. Um, I can't send something offshore and expect to have a great description that makes sense to the business. So there's an interaction. IT cannot on their own figure out what good
correct,
data looks like, because I don't know what's important to the users at the other end. And
correct.
so, like you said, it is many teams. Sometimes it's even management being
Yes.
pushing. So I've seen it also where we want to do some initiative. And we say we want to start off on the right foot, we want to do things right or something, but then management is focusing on delivering quickly. Like, yeah, I
Mm,
know, like, again, it's a balance, but if you put deadlines, arbitrary deadlines, without really having a good understanding of the scope, then it's
mm,
meaningless. And then
I
what's happening
understand.
is people are cutting corners. I've been on projects where I used to say, there's there's some box of things that we want to do. There's some idea of what we want to do, but we keep cutting corners. And I said, in the end, we end up with a circle. I mean, we had an idea, but we've cut so many corners
Yeah.
that's and I said that circle is a target on our head, because
Mm.
what will happen is that people will then see the outcome. Nobody cared about how you got there. They look
Yeah.
at what the outcome is at the end. And so if you focus too much on delivery, you didn't spend enough time on discovery, you're holding people to, like I said, in some cases it may be arbitrary. You're not listening to the people on the ground, the army that's actually making this happen.
Yes.
Then that's also another issue. And so again, it's a balance with all of these things. It's a balance. It's, you got to make sure that everybody's aligned, that
Mm.
you're incentivizing people correctly,
Yes.
because otherwise you get the wrong behavior. And I've seen it many times where in an organization you will go to solve something, and you solve it, and in a couple of years you're solving it again, and in a couple of years you're solving it again. You go through
Yeah.
this cycle because you never really solved it well. And
Mm.
so as management changes, as people come in and out, they see
Mm.
it's still a problem, you go through this whole cycle again.
Yeah. So yeah, and that also, uh, that brings me to a point where, um, the continuity of the work we're doing within our organization. So if you have a project that starts at some point of time, and then, it takes, it takes a couple of years to implement, and then management, people change, and the people go and leave the organization, new people come in, and they have other vision and things like that. So
Yeah.
they probably can go and retire entire programs where they started like a couple of years ago, and then they start their things their own way, or their own, vision of how
Hmm.
things should be done. And that also puts a sort of, a blockage on the way, things,
Yeah.
are being done within an organization. Did you experience any of these,
Yeah,
issues in?
I still see that definitely, because like the people who were sold on the initial vision, like you said, move, new people coming with different ideas, different priorities, etc. Um, I think part of the way to solve that is what you said earlier. It's about delivering quickly, right? So what you want is that by the time this person comes in, the train already left the station. You have a
Yeah.
lot more people already moving in a certain direction, and
Mm.
so it's hard to steer in a different way. Or you've already seen some wins, so you are doing some quick wins. You are
Mm.
doing certain things align with that end vision. Um, and what I've seen is that the initiative does take too long. So
Right.
if it takes 6 months or 1 year before you see any change,
Mhm.
then it's as if nothing happened. The other thing that ends up happening actually when projects take so long is that the people, by the time it gets delivered, it's things have changed.
Yeah.
Business priorities have changed, objectives have changed, goals have changed, and so it's too late.
Yeah.
But if we were adjusting course, right, if we were delivering and adjusting and reprioritizing more frequently,
Yeah.
then we are staying aligned. And then when that new person comes in, it's not too far off from the high. I mean, what is that person doing? Usually they're coming in to to fill a role, but they're getting feedback from their management,
Correct.
right? And so you're not, the organization typically isn't changing all at once.
Yeah.
So the management must still be there, or the manager's manager is still around. And so as long as they're staying with the same vision,
Mhm.
and you're showing that you're moving towards that vision, then you're okay. But if you're not, so new person comes in and management goes like, yeah, there's a team, they've been working on this thing for a year, I haven't seen anything. They tell me that things are improving, they tell me that it'll be great, but I haven't seen anything. So what is
Right.
this person going to say? It's like, okay, well, I'm going to be the hero, I'm going to make
Mm.
this work better. I've done it before. I have implemented a data governance program in 6 months or 3 months or something like that, so I know how to do it. Well, is it that the current team couldn't have delivered, or is it just that there was a lack of alignment? It could be a number of things, but that's what I think. It's that balance and showing some progress, and there is a part of it that is selling. It's a
Yeah.
constant selling. It's a stakeholder management. Is making sure that people are staying aligned.
Yeah.
The manager's manager may be getting new things from the CEO, and they're saying, "Oh, our vision now is to focus on X, Y, and Z." And if they can't make the connection between that and what the team is doing, then it might derail everything, like you said.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I guess it's hard to do right now because there's so many things moving on in terms of tech. In terms of AI being all around. There's so many technologies that are happening. There's so many development that is happening right now. So I guess it's gonna be really really hard to get the management focus on what they have already. Instead of chasing
Hmm.
the next shiny object and trying to derail initiatives that already started within the organization. So I guess it's gonna become more and more complicated in the next coming years to stay
Indeed.
focused on specific things.
Yeah, I tell people to focus on the basics, on um, the fundamentals, let's say, because
Yeah,
those don't change.
right.
Technology changes, new initiatives change, but I call them the data truths. It's
Yeah.
the same thing. It doesn't change. You need to think about the process end to end. You need to have good data quality. You need to document. You need to have good guidelines and conventions and
Mhm.
governance and all of that kind of stuff. That doesn't change. It doesn't mean that Gen AI doesn't need that all of a sudden.
Right.
You need to think about points of failure, reducing points of failure. There's many things like that that don't change regardless of what we're talking about. And so if we change the conversation to that,
Mhm.
then I think you can achieve better results. Now what'll happen is that the new thing is the shiny object.
Yeah.
And so what I say to people is, how can you deliver the shiny object but show how the whole process could be better? So
Correct.
yes, it is Gen AI for sales or something, or some other part of the organization. But let's not just take what's there and build on top of it, because
Mhm.
again, it's probably a shaky foundation. Let's rethink how we got that data from source to the Gen AI, and then talk about, look, we did this in a way that is more maintainable long term. It's easier to debug, it's tested better, it's
Mm,
more
mm.
automated, whatever it is, right? So that then in the end you say, we delivered what you wanted, but we did it in a different way, and that different way is what we need to think about everything,
Yeah,
the whole process, because that's what needs changing.
yeah. So, Noel, in your experience, in order to do that, so do you think, or do you see in the number of organization you worked with, a difference between people who develop internally versus people who rely on vendors' technologies and solutions to try to achieve their goals? So, what what is helping most in terms of reaching this common goals, or is it a hybrid approach where you mix this and this depending on your business needs?
Yeah, I think the best is to that it needs to be a mix. I think
Mhm.
that some of technologies out there, including the stuff that we're doing, we're enablers.
Yeah.
We don't do everything, but we're helping reduce some overhead, some burden to the organization. And what I tell people is that you need to understand the enabling technology. So the analogy I use is more, or the metaphor, I guess, it's a kitchen, right? So
Mhm.
traditionally we say, um, I'm going to figure out what everybody needs, and I'm going to bake everything. I'm going to cook
Mhm.
everything for everybody, and and that becomes very hard, because now that those cooks become the bottleneck for everything, right? And we're not enabling people. And you will find that you don't want to enable people, because you say, well, no, those people don't know how to cook. If I give them a knife, they will cut themselves. There's a number of reasons, right? We say, no, let's focus on how we can change this. So let's say, let's build an industrial kitchen. Let's figure out how we create processes that can be disseminated. So if we have people who can cook,
Yeah.
let them cook, but they should follow certain processes. The people who don't have knife skills, let's teach them knife skills. So now we still accept that there's a risk that some people will get cut, but
Yeah.
it's not going to be the end of the world. And that's the thing, that if we look at this as, like when you're raising a child, if you prevent them from doing anything, they never mature to
True.
to to be doing anything on their own.
Yeah.
And you give them guidelines. You say, like, before you cross the street, you have to do certain things. Look both ways, etc. Right? And so that's what we need to. The organization needs to move to that, to more mentorship, more of these guidelines. People don't intentionally want to do things wrong. I
Mm,
think that if you show people, here are ways that you can achieve what you want and still comply with the needs of the organization,
right.
people will follow that. They will do it wrong when you're not solving the needs, when someone else says they can solve the needs. It's n number of things, but I think that there's a balance, and I think it can be done, and I've seen it done.
Yeah. Yeah. That's very. There's a lot of insights in the words you said, Noel, today. So for this session, a lot of things. So I think the debate can go on and on and on. And I thank you very much for your time with us today.
Thank you for having me on, and happy to come back anytime.
Thank you, Noel.
Thanks.